Well, hello my antique loving friends, it's Gregory here with Old Europe Antique Home Furnishings, and it's time for another episode of Antique Acquisitions. So today what I want to do is talk about antique trends in 2024, what's going to be hot and what's not, and there's a couple of ways we'll look at this. I want to look at a huge survey from dealers and other professionals in the industry from 2023. I want to look at some of the economic data that has come in, and I want to extrapolate these things into the future and see what we can come up with. So we'll get started right after this. Welcome back. Now let's talk about trends in 2024 in the antiques industry. There's so much going on. Some exciting things are happening. You've got this resurgence in demand for brown furniture and earthier tones, and for the first time in the history of this particular survey that we're going to look at, Louis XVI has appeared in the charts. So this is exciting stuff. And that, coupled with the supply chain issues that have just started, are probably going to only increase demand for some of these antique items as replacements or substitutes for new items that are either becoming too expensive or taking too long to arrive. So with that, let's get into the study here. It's the Ashford Institute of Antiques annual survey. They are a school for antiques, and as a result they have a huge base of former students and other industry professionals that they can poll, and that's where this data comes from. Anthony Harper, the school's lead researcher, says that while most other industries suffered from early supply chain issues in 2023, it was actually a boon to many working in the decorative arts business, since supplies of used goods were already readily available. People turned to antiques and vintage items when they couldn't source new, said Harper, in large part because the items were right there in front of them and could be immediately taken home. This accessibility helped dramatically bolster sales of Victorian and early American pieces, according to many of the dealers involved in the survey. Our survey has been showing a resurgence of interest related to brown furniture for a while now, he noted, but this past year it really began to resonate in a much larger way with a variety of different buyers and collectors. Now, I don't know how many of y'all have had the chance to take a look at last year's video that I made on trends in 2023, but it was also based on the Ashford Institute poll that they did at the end of 2022, and along with some other information that I provided. But the general idea is that you were seeing a move slightly away from mid-century modern, though it's still popular, still doing well, towards some of the warmer, earthier tones, the more brown furniture, and the idea of collecting some objects that you can put in the home to give it a warm feeling and convey the impression of a life well lived. So that was generally the theme. I went on to say, based on some other research that I had done, and I do have a background in finance and economics, that you could expect prices to continue to rise despite a slowing economy. And I think largely that's what we've seen, because as you know, the Federal Reserve, has been hiking interest rates now for quite some time, very rapidly, in an effort to decrease the money supply and thereby bring down demand and prices along with it. To a degree, they have slowed the rate of inflation somewhat. We are having some disinflation in certain sectors right now. Inflation stems from three main areas. One is increased demand. The other is deficit spending by the federal government, which they bring in by creating debt, which is monetized by the Federal Reserve, which increases the money supply. And the other is by expansion of the money supply through the banking system, which occurs more rapidly when interest rates are lower. And that's obviously the area that they've been attacking with higher interest rates. But there's just no way that they're going to be able, in my opinion, to have enough of an impact without totally destroying the economy. I mean, if you want to say that economic activity goes to zero, money velocity goes to zero, then yes, prices are going to crater. But short of that, it's hard for me to see how you're not going to continue to see an upward spiral in prices for most things, and antiques would be included in that. And I will say that it's interesting because I talked to some of the shippers that deliver items that my customers buy. And my business, incidentally, for those of you who don't know, Old Europe Antique Home Furnishings is primarily online. And the feedback that I've gotten lately is that while some other sectors of sales have slowed, antique sales seem to be rocking and rolling right along. That's where they're finding their business. These shippers, of course, I mean, that could be biased because I know them by referring business to them in the antique sector. But I think that's interesting. And one thing that would corroborate that a little bit is that the Ashford Institute survey remarks that as we continue to see supply chain issues, which will get significantly worse with the crisis in the Suez Canal, that the availability of existing antique products is going to make them more attractive versus some of the newer things that might be either more expensive or delayed due to shipping crisis in the Suez Canal. All right, so now let's take a look at the Ashford Institute survey. The way they've divided this survey up is into 3 categories, and they divide those categories by dealer age. So we have results from the 20 to 40 year old dealers, the 40 to 60 year old dealers, and the 60 to 80 year old dealers. So let's take a look first at the 20 to 40 year old category and see what was the number 1 most popular category for 2023. And it is Art Deco, harkening back to the idea of the warmer tones, the older brown furniture. And you know, honestly, I think as things get crazier and crazier in this world, there's going to be that desire to have the solidity and affiliation with some of the older furniture. So, number 1, Art Deco. This cornerstone of mass-produced modernity continues to dominate the sales charts as younger dealers in this category consistently report robust sales performances from virtually every corner of the showroom floor. Items falling under Art Deco style or those closely resembling it, including copycat items from the 1980s, witnessed strong demand across the board again this year. While smaller items like ashtrays, clocks, table lamps, and objects of art were all popular, many poll respondents indicated that the current trend had shifted more towards furniture and larger case pieces recently, which resulted in a surge of sales for items such as cabinets, dressers, nightstands, beds, and sofas, as demand for available furniture spiked due to supply chain constraints of commercial retail outlets earlier in the year. So there's 2 primary factors that are driving trends right now in terms of the younger generation of folks purchasing antiques. One is this idea of going green, conserving, reusing, recycling, repurposing items from previous eras. And the other is supply chain issues that simply make it easier to acquire things that have already been produced and that are already here, rather than waiting on them to arrive or noticing that those items, the new items, are much more expensive because of supply chain issues or whatever it is that's driving up the cost of the newer items. The old pieces are an excellent alternative. The second category in the 20 to 40 year old age group of dealers in terms of their demand was mid-century modern. So here you've got the top two categories for the 20 to 40 year old dealers of Art Deco and mid-century modern. For many, this is about as stable as it gets when it comes to sourcing sellable inventory. Most of this year's 20-something dealer crowd indicated that MCM had continued to maintain its strong appeal with both buyers and collectors, especially when it came to urban areas between the two coasts. While some high-end dealers reported a slowdown in realized prices in cities like New York and Los Angeles, for the most part, poll respondents said that overall sales numbers had been positive and plentiful. Wayfair and West Elm knockoffs are now considered by many dealers to be a canary in the coal mine barometer for MCM's anticipated longevity or potential demise. And incidentally, I did a video on the potential demise of MCM along with a description of what it is and a lot of examples of what it looks like in one of my previous videos if you want to check that out. The third most popular category is textiles. The passion for vintage items, particularly in the realm of textiles, shows no sign of waning. Sales in recent years have surged, drawing an increasing number of vendors into this highly profitable market. What was once an offbeat option for a consignment or secondhand store has now become one of the most popular and profitable choices for young dealers. The fourth most popular category is Memphis design style. Making its first appearance on the charts this year, the quirky and colorful designs originally conceived of by Italian architect Ettore Sottsass in the early 1980s are a rejection of the sleek and streamlined styles of mid-century modern and brutalism and instead merge influences of Art Deco, pop art, and audacious color palettes into daring geometric shapes and patterns that clash in a seemingly chaotic but deliberate manner. For many of today's younger vintage dealers along urban coastlines, think Miami and Los Angeles, MDS has become the new MCM. The fifth most popular category, space collectibles. With shows such as For All Mankind, now in its fourth season, hawking an alternate reality where the space race and space tourism are a mainstay in our daily lives, along with the continuing exploits of Elon Musk and his SpaceX rockets, it would seem that this collectible category has nowhere else to go but up. A perennial list maker with deals across all age groups, it's a genre that's growing in popularity with each passing year. Nostalgia from baby boomers for Apollo and space shuttle related toys leads the way. The sixth most popular category is now Victorian, and that includes both early, mid, and late. So we're talking about the 1830s up to early 1901, possibly a little past that. Notching up one slot from last year's survey, Victorian furniture continued to make steady gains as big box commercial furniture outlets were hampered by supply chain issues. Dealers reported that the plentiful availability of Victorian items was at the heart of sales increases in the early part of the year, but that robust numbers were maintained as traditionally cash-strapped Gen Zers picked up the slack by continuing to snap up reasonably priced pieces as an alternative to flat pack and new, and with an eye to the environment. But dealers noted that smaller items and decorative pieces were also starting to sell. A number of poll respondents also acknowledged that some clients now appeared to be looking beyond just practical accent pieces with an eye to brown furniture as an integral aspect of their decorative scheme. Here again, I can't remember which video it was I made last year, but it may have been the Trends in 23 video, or it may have been one that I did later in the year, but I did cite some evidence that brown furniture was beginning to make a bit of a comeback, and it seems that that is continuing to progress, and I would expect it to do so, because the fact of the matter is that 19th century well-carved Renaissance style furniture and other styles are dramatically undervalued for not only the amount of artistic work that went into them, but also just their historic value and the age that they bring to the table. So I would expect this trend to continue. It might not explode, but it does seem to be progressing in the right direction. And I don't see prices dropping in that category in the near future unless the economy really does crash, and then everything's going to drop. But let's move on. Number 7, the 7th most popular category for dealers 20 to 40 years of age is Early Americana Canadiana. Also on the rise and following just behind Victorian's move up the chart this year is the also contender for reasonably priced furniture that just happens to blend with the modern decor. As categories go, most dealers feel this genre probably has the most room to move as decorative tastes begin to shift to more neutral wood colored palettes. As was the case last year, blending rustic to modern was the focus of most customer requests. However, many dealers are reporting that the ratio of rustic to modern is beginning to change, with early American pieces starting to rival contemporary examples for top billing. Leading the decorative charge were harvest tables, blanket boxes, coffee tables, smaller hutches, wash stands, decorative farm implements, condo-friendly chests of drawers, and rustic work boxes with simple stenciling. 8th most popular category is kitchen and barware. While a fan favorite last year with almost everyone, prices for items in this category have significantly cooled over the past 12 months, especially in the kitchen and particularly with Corningware. 2022's insane cookware prices have seemingly come back down to earth somewhat, as previous stratospheric highs for casserole dishes prompted many to dig deep into the entrails of their kitchen cabinets for similar examples, resulting in a flood of freshly unearthed products hitting the market that subsequently dropped prices. However, many dealers stress that while sales figures may have dipped in the kitchen, related barware examples have showed steady pricing increases across the board. The 9th most popular category is ornate lighting. While virtually all areas of lighting remained popular this year, examples of ornate chandeliers from the turn of the 20th century proved to be especially popular with those looking to blend Victorian aesthetics with modern minimalism. Chrome and plastic examples from the 70s, while still popular, gave way to many looking for something a little more traditional and embellished, with gold and black examples being the colors of choice. Some younger dealers expressed surprise at the sudden interest in the ornate motif, while others simply chalked it up to the inevitable resurgence of Victorian-themed designs moving back into the marketplace. All right, the 10th and final most popular category for the dealers aged 20 to 40 is Louis the 16th. And I don't think I remember that anywhere in last year's survey. This yet points again to the resurgence of some of the older styles, and I think one reason for that is you have shows on Netflix like Downton Abbey, The Crown, and there's a few others that I haven't seen but that I've heard of, and I think that these are helping to bring those furniture styles back into popular culture, and I think this is a trend that's just getting started, and so that could be a good thing for antiques. 10th category, Louis the 16th, riding on the coattails of the public's newfound interest in Victorian lighting and making it onto the charts for the first time ever. That's what I thought, didn't remember that. Dealers from this category registered some surprising sales numbers related to Louis the 16th styled furniture, especially the desks. I've got a ton of desks in Louis 16th style desks and furniture right now. And I also did a video on Louis XVI style last year, so you can check that out as well. Anyway, Louis XVI style furniture, especially the desks, neoclassical in nature with straight lines and geometric patterns, these pieces often blend in well with the modern motif and can be used as accent pieces. Okay, let's move on to the second grouping, which is antique dealers from the age of 40 to 60. What was the most popular category demanded by their customers? Automobilia and Petrolina. Whether it's the Mike Wolfe effect from the television show Pickers or just the natural evolution of collecting becoming a sales juggernaut, there appears to be no end in sight to the public's, read men's, desire to purchase and possess Automobilia and Petrolina collectibles. Always the bridesmaid but never quite the bride, Automobilia and Petrolina have finally made it to the top of the charts with an almost unprecedented rise in gross sales over the last few years. Whether it be signage, emblems, tinware, chrome grills, oil cans, car maps, or even auto posters, almost every antique and vintage dealer surveyed reported incredibly strong sales from within this category, with 2023 numbers standing out as some of the best on record. Reproductions abound, so be careful if what you want is authentic items. Demand for everything auto is expected to remain strong into next year and likely beyond. The second most popular for dealers aged 40 to 60 is mid-century modern, whereas if you recall, the most popular category for the 20 to 40 year olds was mid-century modern. So what we're seeing here is that mid-century modern is still on top. As mentioned previously, MCM has exceeded most pundits' expectations regarding its anticipated decline. Antique and vintage resellers aged 40 and 60, though relatively late to embrace the MCM movement at its inception, have caught up in recent years and now form the largest demographic group of dealers and retailers working within this domain. Similar to their younger counterparts, these dealers have also witnessed continued interest and growth of sales related to MCM, particularly for furniture pieces by known designers. Darker teak items such as desks, tables, bureaus, and cabinets are popular choices, according to dealers, as they complement bold decorative colors as well as meshing well with light wood tones styles such as pine primitives. Third most popular category, vintage jewelry. In a matter of just a few short years, there has been a notable resurgence in the popularity of period gems and stones. As reported by a number of industry dealers, the demand for legitimate gemstones in settings over costume jewelry, meaning instead of costume jewelry, has gained traction not only in North America recently, but in Europe as well. For dealers in the US and Canada, prices for authentic items on the wholesale market have shot up quickly, leaving many with a shortfall in inventory due to rising costs and lack of available source stock from picked over garage and estate sales. Victorian and Art Deco pieces have become particularly favored by buyers, with some later mid-century examples from Van Cleef and Arpels also gaining attention. Notable names like Poisson, Templier, Cartier, Tiffany, and Bailey Banks and Biddle lead the Art Deco revival, while lesser-known designers from the late Victorian period are increasingly appreciated, especially for their sizable brooches and matching bracelets. The fourth category is Art Deco. For a number of dealers in this category, there's a feeling that Art Deco may now be forever twinned with mid-century modern, its tides rising and falling based on MCM's continued or perceived popularity. Some respondents also indicated that they thought Art Deco and MCM to simply be part of the same post-modern revival movement. Thus, when one falls out of favor, so will the other. However, for the time being, almost all who were surveyed in this category responded with strong sales numbers that were coincidentally or not, often in lockstep with MCM figures. As for specific sales items that moved well this year, most dealers agreed that smalls took home the award, with items such as lamps, clocks, jewelry, wall lighting, and decorative objects being far away the biggest sellers, with conventional furniture and large case pieces pulling up the rear. All right, the fifth category is Victorian, early, mid, and late. As expressed by many dealers throughout this survey, Victorian era pieces seem to be having a moment. Not necessarily a breakout moment, but what appears to be a long and steady climb back towards a place of prominence within the decorative arts realm. While certainly not widespread in its application, higher-end dealers in this age group from various areas, including the Northeast and Northwest, are beginning to see a demand again for quality accent pieces, while dealers with less affluent clients are seeing strong interest from those looking to purchase for less than new at antique and vintage shows. Either way, it's good news for dealers who say that sales numbers for this category are rising steadily, with some showing more than double-digit growth year over year. Items that are distinctly representative of the Victorian era were the most popular, including marble-topped occasional tables, oak buffets, pedestal tables, Gothic and Rococo Revival, and East Lake. The sixth most popular category for dealers aged 40 to 60 is textiles. While some of the dealers from this category were a little late to the game, they've certainly made up lost ground, as they now represent the most predominant age group within this collecting genre. The textile movement has continued to extend its influence across various vendors in its decorative arts marketplace and now sits as one of the most consistently lucrative options for those hoping to work with the vintage industry. The seventh most demanded category in the 40 to 60 year old dealer age group is Art Nouveau. Remaining in its same position from last year, dealers from this category are attributing the public's renewed interest in the Art Nouveau style to its timely connection to Art Deco's ongoing popularity. Sales for lighting, particularly larger chandeliers, along with smaller items such as glass and objects of art, have grown steadily according to many dealers in the urban areas. As corollary interest by buyers of mid-century modern pieces seems to have sparked a return to more sinuous and graceful lines for some collectors. Okay, the eighth most popular category for 40 to 60-year-old dealers is Country Club Chic. Now, I haven't seen this one before. New to the charts this year is a style that goes by a number of different names, including Coastal Grandpa, but which also happens to be exceptionally representative of those working in the antique and vintage trade. As decorative trends have begun moving more towards nostalgia in recent years, dealers have reported an uptick in the heritage-inspired purchases ranging from leather arm and club chairs to traditional oriental rugs, hammered brass decorative bowls, hunting-themed wall decor, and richly textured upholstered antique furniture. In short, a dream team style for those in the antique and vintage business. The ninth most popular category for the 40 to 60-year-old dealers is paintings and sculptures, and I love to hear that. We've got over 100 paintings. Dealers report that brutalist mid-century sculptures from the likes of Henrik Horst, Paul Evans, Jerry, and Jack Rogers Hopkins continue to be extremely desirable in today's market, as are metal wall art creations. And I really need to do a video on Victorian art, 19th century paintings. Would like to discuss the difference between signed and unsigned paintings. Moving on, the 10th most popular category for 40 to 60 year age dealers is jukebox decor. While the 1950s is often thought of as solely belonging to the mid-century modern movement, there was also another style that ran concurrent with MCM, but in a much flashier form. Often titled jukebox decor or sock hop style, it was essentially everything MCM wasn't. Lots of chrome, vinyl top soda shop bar stools, retro converted 57 Chevy car seats, black and white square floor tiles, and textiles that included James Dean style leather jackets along with bobby socks and saddle shoes. While not quite a trend just yet, sufficient questionnaire rumblings were enough to land this potential style choice on the charts for the very first time, indicating that it might not be long before we see a younger generation that's finally ready to embrace the stylings of the Fawns. Hey! Now we are ready to discuss the most popular categories for the dealers in the age group 60 to 80. I assume that these are some of the old bastions, some stalwarts of the industry. So let's take a look and see what they are having success with. The number one most popular category in this age group of dealers, and if my memory doesn't fail me, this was also the case last year, is Chinese antiques. Holding tight to last year's position, Chinese antiques have once again risen to the top of the awards podium. Despite continued strained relations between East and West, there doesn't appear to be any loss of interest by the public when it comes to acquiring legitimate examples of antiques from the Far East. Prices have escalated dramatically over recent years, with dealers across the globe reporting robust numbers from both in-shop sales as well as auctions. And to the extent that this particular category of antiques is affected by what's going on in the Suez Canal with the delays and the rerouting of so many of those cargo containers, this could have a pretty significant impact on prices in this category. Something to keep in mind. Let's carry on. However, many dealers continue to caution customers and others within the industry of the ongoing battle related to fakes and the difficulties involved in obtaining authentic inventory. For those that were able to overcome the legitimacy hurdle, sales of textiles, standard vessels, including vases, teapots, plates, and jugs, as well as gonbi and shumo paintings, were all highlights of the season, commanding primo prices, while sales of traditional Chinese hall furniture were reported as stable or somewhat flat for the year. Sustainable inventory sources remain weak and unreliable due to political tensions and restricted trade. Well, I mean, that's another thing. China too, the political tensions between China and the U.S. Chinese antiques is not my cup of tea. The name of my shop is Old Europe Antique Home Furnishing, so my focus is entirely on European antiques. I don't really even get involved with American items. So not my cup of tea, not my area of expertise, but it is the #1 most popular category for 60 to 80-year-old dealers. So we have to keep an eye on it. All right, the second most popular category in that age group is mid-century modern. So I mean, mid-century modern is really dominating, which I find extraordinary because I really have not had that much luck with it myself, and perhaps that's because all of my marketing efforts have gone over the past years to developing this store as a place to buy Georgian, Victorian, Edwardian brown furniture. Anyway, remaining in a holding pattern at #2 from last year, MCM continues to be a bread and butter choice for a number of senior dealers. While many acknowledge that sales of the post-modern style are heavily influenced by geographic and architectural considerations, they also note that even in less urbanized areas, the appeal of MCM remains strong with a variety of age groups, despite not having the requisite architecture to house the style. As price points for dealers have risen steadily over the last few years, sourcing affordable stock from even mainstream manufacturers like Baker, Broyhill, Knoll, Whitcomb, and Craft Associates has become increasingly difficult. Most dealers in this category expect MCM prices will continue to rise for the foreseeable future, as there's little indication of stalling interest from the public. The third most popular category for dealers in the 60 to 80 year range is, drumroll, Victorian. Continuing our discussion here of the resurgence of brown furniture. Up 3 spots from last year's tally may make it seem like the Victorian resurgence is in full swing, but senior dealers say not so fast. While sales have improved considerably over the last few years, most sellers indicate it's simply down to a numbers game. Yes, volume sales results are 300% better than they were in 2018, but that doesn't mean that prices have risen commensurately. According to most dealers in this category, Victorian prices are moving due primarily to cut rate pricing, not surging demand. Small accent pieces, marble-topped occasional tables, and washstands and petite-sized cottage chests of drawers were all reported as selling well. As one would expect, supplies continue to be plentiful in virtually every market. That's because the flow of containers from Europe to America, along with American furniture, I always think from a European perspective, are unhindered at this point. And in fact, container costs are back down to pre-2020 levels, when you had the government restrictions that caused all sorts of problems with supplies and containers and whatnot. All right, but still, we have to remember that Victorian is now the third most demanded category in the 60 to 80-year-old group of dealers. Moving on to the fourth most demanded category, it is Georgian. So now we're talking about, mid 18th to early 19th century furniture. As we mentioned last year, dealers are finally beginning to express some positive numbers related to sales of Georgian furniture. Streaming services continue to blast out television programs like The Crown and Bridgerton, exposing more and more people to the incredible Georgian furnishings featured within the show's mansions. However, even with the positive uptick in numbers and televised press, dealers say it's still too early to know whether or not this mini resurgence in sales and interest is going to stick long term. High-end auction results continue to reinforce the comeback, but most surveyed dealers have indicated a holding pattern for the foreseeable future. Inventory remains plentiful, with prices somewhat up over the discounted highs of only a few years ago. All right, fifth most demanded category. Art Deco. Much like MCM, Art Deco seems poised to remain in the upper echelons of category-wide rankings for some time, especially with a tranche of senior dealers, reminiscent of their younger counterparts, echoing an apparent connection between Art Deco's continued popularity being contingent on that of mid-century moderns. However, other dealers seem less convinced, instead believing that the distinctive design elements of Art Deco furniture, such as streamlined forms, bold patterns, and luxurious embellishments, are what set it apart from other styles entirely. For most dealers in this category, though, the debate is a moot point, since demand is currently greater than supply, which means that in the near term, prices will most certainly increase. Architectural antiques is the sixth highest category. Up 3 spots. From 2022, architectural antiques made a surprise run up the charts this year, which many dealers from the AA trade group attributed to the public's move away from farmhouse gray with its ultra-clean lines and somewhat sterile environment to a more forgiving look that included vintage items with chippy paint and rough-hewn boards and exposed knots. Other recyclables that ended up on the right side of the ledger included stair balusters, railings, iron gates, oversized built-in appliances, old doors, and multi-paned wooden windows. The seventh most demanded item or category for the 60 to 80-year-old dealers is Victorian paintings. It's just a few minutes ago I mentioned that I need to do a video on that because I've got tons of them. I love them. I absolutely love them. 2 years ago, we noted that a number of senior dealers from this age bracket has witnessed a nascent revival and interest related to Victorian paintings. Since that time, other dealers have also climbed on board, expressing a similar sentiment as sales of Victorian oils and watercolors have steadily moved back into the profitability range over the last couple of years. Though I will say that trying to buy these 19th century and earlier paintings and make money on them is not the easiest thing to do. Sporting scenes, country scenes, portraits, and landscapes have all increased in price, with stock remaining plentiful for decent examples of mid-level artists. Demand for top-tier painters from this era has once again resumed. I suspect that people are attempting to accumulate all types of valuable objects, from commodities to 19th century art, which I assume could be considered a type of a commodity, in order to maintain their wealth against this continuing inflation, which in my view isn't going anywhere. Folk art. Number 8 is folk art, the 8th highest demanded category. Also initially considered a slow burn by many senior dealers, folk art is once again on the comeback trail, particularly in the Southeast, where many dealers note that items such as Merry Maid, whirligigs, and windmill swans and herons have become popular outdoor ornaments for pools as well as on the grounds of coastal beachfront homes. When paired with modern decor, primitive folk art pieces have also proven popular with decorators looking to tone down the somewhat austere feeling of certain MCM designs, the 9th most demanded category. Vinyl records. Hitting up the charts in this category for the first time, vinyl records continue to find new and old collectors as original purveyors of the black disc have returned to their roots in search of classic albums and rare examples of original presses. Adding to the demand for vinyl records were also vintage stereos and receivers. Equipment from the likes of Kenwood, Macintosh, Dynakit, Marantz, and Pioneer were all reported as selling well in a growing market. The 10th category, the last category, is glass. While down another spot this year, some glass categories actually overperformed, at least according to a number of West Coast dealers who say that art glass market continues to be strong with not only collectors but with general consumers as well. However, its bold colors and fanciful shapes that can blend with virtually every design palette, including modern, are likely contributing factors to this genre's continued marketplace success. On the flip side of the spectrum, pressed glass remains stuck in the doldrums, as do most other forms of non-vintage or non-retro inspired pieces. All right, well, that is going to wrap up our discussion of the Ashford Institute's annual survey, and we thank them for putting that out. It's a fantastic resource. It really kind of helps put everything in perspective, along with the other information that we can find. All right, well, that's going to wrap up this episode of Antique Acquisitions. I hope you enjoyed it. Please take a second to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. There will be more videos coming with more antique related content. We'll talk about history, we'll talk about periods, we'll talk about styles, individual pieces, and everything to do with antiques. I'll see you next time.